Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest. His name is Dr. Hans Utter. Last name is spelled Utter. And his website is his full name, so you can check out his website. You can contact him there. You can find out about his other projects. He's done a lot of music. His bio is that he is an ethnomusicologist, author, producer, and researcher. He's deeply rooted in Indian classical music, having studied extensively in India under the tutelage of the world-renowned sitar maestro, Ustad Sujat Khan, performing in Europe, Asia, and North America. As a composer, he explores the crossover between Indian music, jazz, rock, and Western classical music, and is also an accomplished guitar player. And there's more to his bio. You can read it there, but this will be our seventh show, and the title is MKULTRA, Music for the Masses. And this has been very well received by my audience, or people who listen to my show. They listen to this, all this stuff. So he's like one of the top listened to guests that I have on my show. So Hans Utter, welcome back.
Hey, William, great to be here, man.
And we kind of like at the last part, our last one, we kind of had some technical things going on. And so we're kind of picking up where we left off, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So kind of keep going here. And I know that I think a few threads got dropped along the way. And so, yeah, one thing maybe just to start out with is that, you know, let me just exit here. I'm going to read this. This is from a Macy conference document talking about how this began actually in the 40s, right? This type of research, ONA off, through the Navy. And that Ken Babbs and Ken Kesey both met at Stanford in 58. So it's we think that the 60s, starting with like 67 Summer of Love. Of course, you have like say Philip K. Dick in his novels. There's references to psychedelics. In the sort of mid 60s, but really the mass popularization of LSD is actually, this started much earlier, right? The roots were earlier. And so we could just, let me just, I can share the screen, or this is just an interview with Ken Babbs, and he's talking, and I'm just going to, I can send you the link here, but so, again, a lot of this is, presented as very happy-go-lucky, fun, hanging out and, enjoying life or whatever and expanding consciousness. But again, when you look at all the things that were going on, all these various research projects, including sort of the fusion or the merging of, quote unquote, you could say, occult, esoteric types of things with electronics, with photic driving, which is light simulation, like what that does to your brain function with different types of sound. In fact, that goes all the way back to goes back to like Princeton. It goes back to like Princeton Radio Project. I mean, they had these basically they had these like theater set up where they were studying how sound, primarily these were designed to study how sound and light would affect people and affect their minds and stuff like that. And that was done in the 40s, right? So anyways, again, it's just interesting because Ken Babbs here mentions, where they met. So this is not just me saying it. So this is interview by a guy named Legsville, but it says, Ken Babbs, how did you come across Perry Lane? So Ken Babbs says, when Kesey and I met at Stanford in 1958, he was living on Perry Lane in Menlo Park across the street from the Stanford golf course. Perry Lane was actually the dividing line between Palo Alto and Menlo Park. It was a little lane with a big oak in the middle. It's in a series of cabins. So a lot of graduate students live there. And then they mentioned, various people. Bill Kreutzmann was living there also. Vic Lowell was a grad. Vic Lovell, that's Lovell, was a grad student in psychology, and Ken says here, and he was the one that got Kesey to get in on the program the VA was running, giving them samples of drugs to people. So they got So they basically were recruited to be part of these early psychedelic experiments. Okay, and we go on here.
And Babs was an early member of the Pranksters and
Well,
friends with Kesey, so he was in that circle, right?
well, Babs was really, as far as it's hard to get the exact. A lot of this stuff is a little bit difficult to come across, but Babs was the one who was running the technical side of the Merry Pranksters. And again, I'll play this thing from Owsley, but I mean, they had advanced type of sound equipment. They had all these different speaker arrays set up. They had all different kinds of delays and random sounds and words and hypnotic language. So it was not just, the acid tests were quite involved in terms of the technical aspect, right, of all the electronics and everything, the way everything was configured. So we'll listen to Owsley talking about that, but it wasn't just a strobe light and a couple loudspeakers. They had these entire houses were set up, and then actually a lot of the Merry Pranksters, they lived in this environment where Ken and a couple of the other sort of ringleaders were constantly playing different types of weird frequencies affecting people's brains. In fact, this Owsley quote, which we'll listen to, he describes how a particular sound like burrowed into your brain and sort of embedded like almost like a plug that they could insert media or material or commands into your brain. So it's not just, these weren't just, am I being clear here? I mean, these are like sort of military grade, sound and light arrays, along with a lot of hypnotic stuff, hypnotic language that was, based on their backgrounds. Why would you do all that stuff? How would you even afford all that stuff? And how would you know how to work it and coordinate it? You know what I mean? So that's why Ken Babs is so important, because Ken Kesey was like the charismatic front man, but Ken Babs was the guy actually really running the whole show behind the scenes. You know what I mean?
Yep,
so Kesey, Kesey was, he was charismatic. He was you think of anything else, he's like the front man. But he wasn't in charge of all these technical aspects. Right. Right. So I'll just continue. This is again from the same interview. And I said, I can share screen. I'll send you this.
Whatever you like.
But
you can flip in between these slides too.
Okay. Yeah. You want me to just share this? This is just a web link. You want me to share it?
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you can see that I'm not making it up. All right. Let's see. And share.
You can either send it to me in the private chat, or you can just put it in the code.
Okay. Here we go. There we go. So we're sharing right now. Can you see
go.
that?
Yep.
Okay. So here I'm on this paragraph. I think it was more like 60. So the question is, were they experimenting in psychedelics back in 58 and 59? But they joined this, the Stanford studies actually started in the late 50s that they were part of. So this is a little bit, at least based on what I know, this is a couple years off, but whatever. I think it was more like 1960. I was in the Marine Corps then, and I'd fly up from my base in Southern California and spend the weekend at Kesey's. It was one of those weekends I got high with him. He had gotten LSD from the VA hospital by then. That was the way that came about. Was Vic Lowell had gotten into this program that the government was running, MKUltra, testing various chemicals and seeing kinds of effects they had on people. The CIA was trying to see how certain drugs would work, see if it'd make for better soldiers, maybe help in interrogating prisoners. The doctors didn't know what the drugs would do. Ken Kesey got in on it. I don't know if you want to continue, but
I think your point is that a lot of this stuff started early. So like you said, it reached its apex sometime in the late 60s, but it was bubbling under the surface during the 50s. Because I've seen and read some documents where they knew in the 50s they wanted to roll out LSD, or they really were testing it extensively on people, like before it even hit like the public consciousness.
Yeah, well, I'll bring up this document a bit later, talking about 1949 doing mescaline experiments with the Navy, as I mentioned in the beginning. But what's important here is Ken Kesey. He's in the Marine Corps, and he's saying that this was an MKUltra program that they were involved in. So right there is right. Did you see that right there?
Yeah.
He had gotten into the program. So this Vic Lovell guy, who actually I don't know if you're familiar. I did not look him up, but I'm not sure who he is. But he's another one of these, just like Melissa Cargill that I mentioned before, who's the one that was actually making the LSD for Owsley, right? Owsley was an electronics engineer. These guys all had military backgrounds, which is important to note. But, and this is before, the, all the other sort of military connected rock stars, come up from Laurel Canyon, right?
Right.
But so he's saying right there that he is working. Ken Kesey got a job at the same VA hospital. So he's working at this hospital where they're running the MKUltra programs, and he's saying that directly. So there's no, that's his own words, right? And again, Ken Babbs is one of these kind of, sometimes the more obscure figures are the more important figures, right? Especially because, of course, the people running the test program. So anyways, so got a job at the same VA. He tried his key ring and opened the door. He went inside the office, looked around, and opened the middle of a drawer of the desk. Inside, he found a bottle of 500 pure Sandoz laboratory LSD tablets. Kesey pocketed them and took them home, and that's how it came on the scene. Okay. So he just managed to get into this high security government test facility, and his key ring works, and he just steals 500 hits of LSD, and then that's how it started. So you get these stories. So I'll go ahead and
right. And like Sandoz was the epicenter, right? That's where Hoffman worked. So that's where it came. That was like straight from the source, the originator of LSD, right? First guy. Is that right?
Yeah. And so, so again, we have Ken Kesey writing One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which ties into who, right? It ties into this idea that's also pushed by Bateson, with the cybernetics, Macy conferences, that sanity is insanity and insanity is actually sanity, right? The schizophrenic. So, you have Artie Lang, who also, was involved with, some types of LSD experimentation and had this, I don't know if you're familiar with the divided self, right? So that was a very important book. And it's promoting this idea that those who are schizophrenic are actually sane because you're in an insane world. And so, but basically that this is our basically they're pushing this. In fact, there's a whole conference where they talked about this, that what's called insanity is actually sanity, right?
Right.
This is taking, because the name of psychedelics was originally schizophrenogens, which means that generates schizophrenia. Before you have, psychedelics, you have entheogens, you have the original name of schizophrenogens, right? This is a device, a thing that will induce the symptoms of schizophrenia. And that's hence the title of the slideshow is, schismogenesis. So I just get a few more tidbits from here. So he's one. Well, I can just read that. I don't need to show that screen. But basically, you do have this sort of, there's these mythologies, right? Of this just happened, right? This just happened. It just came about. For example, the Grateful Dead, right? Becoming part of the acid test was, we were doing, according to interview with Ken Babbs, we were just outside this place and we were doing an ohm circle and we're all tripping. And we just heard this music coming out of this house and it happened to be the Warlocks or whatever. And so it just was this, serendipitous random occurrence. Right. And that's one of the ways to kind of, there's a lot of these, sort of magical encounters where this happens. But anyway, so I think that's just interesting, that interview, because there's not much on Ken Babbs, and he talks about, they got the station wagon, and then he was helping Ken with his book, One Who Flew the Cuckoo's Nest, in '64, and they started making, reel-to-reel tape recordings. They got big reel-to-reel, and the whole thing with the whole acid tests. And remember, they were driving across the country and distributing LSD all over the country, right? When it was still legal. So they set these up and they were promoting this. And there's many cases where even, some of the people on the bus, they went completely insane. They were in mental hospitals, and it's like, oh, that's cool. just part of it. So, but they don't mention who's, so anyways, you have the advanced light and sound, film projecting. So, I'll move off with this. So and all the Merry Pranksters recording are the UCLA Film and Television Library, which would be quite interesting to check out.
Yeah, definitely would.
But just to, so that's one thing that kind of got lost in the shuffle last time. And the other thing was the Charlatans I mentioned, the first kind of psychedelic rock band, and right. And the Red Dog Saloon. So if you wanted to bring something up on that, the Red Dog Saloon,
let's see if I find it, yeah.
Because this is the original, right, counter culture experiment, really. And they had the light. They had like the light type of thing, light shows. So this, these type of light projection, right? Which, we can trace experiments with this again back at least as early as the 1940s. And even
is Red Dog Saloon, is that a band or what is that?
No, this is the venue. So they basically had like a live-in commune, right? And it's still there. But I bring something up, but yeah, it's still there. It's so
it wants to pop up something in Juneau, Alaska. That's why.
Okay, yeah, no, Red Dog Saloon in Nevada. So basically, this was like they had everyone from like Janis Joplin coming out there to all kinds of different artists in the around the same time as the Merry Pranksters. But this is before there was really a psychedelic rock scene. And in fact, the dress code was like there were, like 1850s, like, traditional cowboy gear. You know what I mean? They would dress, they dressed in this sort of archaic throwback, you know what I mean, from the 1820s to the 1850s. But this is where they would have artists come in as guest artists, and they would live there. And part of being a guest artist there is you have to take LSD and perform right at the saloon.
Right. So there's the Charlatans right there, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Yep. So
this is from their website.
Yeah.
reddogvc.rocks.
Yeah. So, but if you look at that, all these different house bands, but people were being inducted into the psychedelic world. And then a lot of times they went back to San Francisco, right? And started opening up venues, you know what I mean? So this was sort of the precursor. And there's some articles, talking about it. You have all these government officials coming out to the Red Dog Saloon, senators coming there, well-known people coming there and hanging out. And so, and it's always like some of these things that just pop up, they kind of get scrubbed here. So, it's kind of, interesting. So, I'll see. So this is like
that's like old West Coast stuff, Virginia City, Nevada, or whatever it is.
Yeah. And again, what's interesting is that they didn't have the psychedelic dresses. Everyone was wearing period clothes, right? But they're all tripping on LSD and mescaline. And so, and there's, and they had, so like you even have the clothing boutique, Mike Ferguson, coming from the Red Dog Saloon, relocating in San Francisco. It was called the Magic Theater for Madmen Only, right? And they had Victorian artifacts, and they had this new psychedelic clothing lines were introduced. And again, this was sort of like the training facility, and last time we played, the Charlatans. So they don't, they sound more like, just little gritty sort of garage rock, basically. So no psychedelic stuff. But, and they're shifting from the amphetamines to the psychedelics. And then, of course, as we talked about, in San Francisco, is that there was a huge meth scene in San Francisco in the late 60s, right? All the hippies were burned out on acid and they started taking meth, and exactly mirroring the experiments of Manson's, parole officer, who was looking at when you take a rat population and you feed them LSD and methamphetamines, what happens, right? So we discussed that.
We covered that. Yeah, that was two shows ago, I think.
Yep. So, But anyway, so it's just interesting. Again, you have lots and lots of people and even observers coming, right? And so there's some documentaries on that, but that's sort of one of those sort of forgotten things, but they all moved to San Francisco, right? They were in place before the Summer of Love, right? This is 64, 65, right? And so even again, so that you can't discount the importance of the psychedelic clothing as well, right? So that psychedelic clothing, the day glow colors, all that stuff, right? Sort of the neo primitivism, whatever, return to tribal culture. So that's very important. So if you want to chime in there, we can maybe go to
I mean, I think you're just showing that the cultural history was percolating before it kind of blew up, right? Summer of Love, what went down in Haight-Ashbury. It was still, there were like little Johnny Appleseeds kind of seeding the cultural landscape, so to speak, before it actually blew up.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting, I mean, in some ways, it's. I mean, I just chanced upon that today, actually, with the thing of Ken Babb saying, we're working for MKUltra, right? They were part of the MKUltra experiments. He's saying it directly,
Right.
and then did Kesey, or was Kesey just said, go ahead and take it and start distributing it? Because these guys all had military backgrounds. In fact, as I mentioned, they knew themselves earlier than he's saying in the interview, because they were both Woodrow Wilson fellows, right? They're both on the same fellowship program.
Right.
So, and one thing is that, if someone knows about this, let me know, but just the the whole thing with who was running all the tech for the Merry Prank, for the Merry Pranksters. I mean, it was advanced tech. So just on that
but
note,
just sorry to interrupt, but also Woodrow Wilson Fellow was the guy from The Dead too, right?
Oh, was it
one of the singers?
Oh, that I don't. Wow. Okay, that
I'll have to go back and look that up. I thought that one of them was also a Woodrow Wilson guy fellowship. Yeah,
that'd be quite.
I'll have to go back and double check that. Yeah,
quite interesting. But again, you notice that all these guys have military backgrounds, and then right there at Stanford, Palo Alto. I mean, where they're conducting all of these experiments, right? And we get into the whole psychic research stuff. I think we may have stopped with the Jolly West thing, but so let me go ahead and roll. This is, I think, pretty interesting. I think some of these didn't go through. So, and one thing I just want to mention also, though, is that I played a quote before of Owsley talking about his girlfriend. Actually, he had two girlfriends at the same time, right? But the one who actually made the LSD, and she was his guru. And one of the things she says is that trips are real, right? Whenever you're tripping, just think it's completely real. Well, that's a ticket for delusional psychosis, right? Even if you have, you know what I mean? It just in general, even if you're not on LSD. So, I can, I'll just go ahead and I don't know if I played the clip about Owsley meeting the dead. Let me. I'll just.
Can you play that? Yeah, play it.
I could play it. Here we go. So I'll take this off mute, and I will turn my mic down. And here we go.
I found it very interesting, and interesting enough so that I went down several more times. And one of the times when I had heard about this band, which was the first time I went down there, they were calling the Warlocks. And I didn't pay that much attention to it, except they were obviously all excited about it. And the next time I went, next time I went down, someone came in and said they just picked the name Grateful Dead. I think it was Mountain Grove. Came in and said that. Said, oh, they've got a new name. They named themselves. They couldn't be the Warlocks because some band in Florida had that name. Which band I never heard of. No, after that, I don't know if they really existed or not. But
Les told me the same thing. He said he was looking through records in the store and saw something by the Warlocks. And he said, he went back and said, hey, you guys, we can't be the Warlocks. But he said he never found that record again. Then I found out that Lou Reed was in a band called the Warlocks before he was in the Velvet Underground.
What?
Isn't that wild, right? Velvet Underground. So you got your New York scene, right? Andy Warhol and all that was involved with the Velvet Underground. And so they were also called the Warlocks, right? Wow. So that's it, Okay. Anyways, let's continue.
So it's possible that was the Warlocks, or could be there was,
The
multiple
story I heard
Warlocks.
was a band that was in Florida or something.
Well,
That was
so they changed their name to Grateful Dead.
And I didn't actually see them play until I went to the Mirror Beach Acid Test. And that's when I saw them play. Whether or not I ran into Garcia or someone else at Kesey's during those visits, I don't really recall. The only person other than Mountain Girl and
Well, anyways, yeah. So they changed their name, and of course, the story is that Jerry just opened up a dictionary and saw the word Grateful Dead. However, there's been people looking through dictionaries trying to find that page he was talking about. No one's found it, right? But the just to mention this, that's very important. Is that the name Grateful Dead is also directly connected with what? That's a quiz for you. Can you tell me?
Grateful Dead. I don't know. What is it? I don't know.
Well, Tim Leary, right? So the whole psychedelic experience was based on it. You're supposed to follow the Tibetan Book of the Dead, right?
Right.
Yeah. And there's all these quotes from various people, from Robert Hunter to Jerry Garcia, whatever, talking about taking LSD and like dying multiple times, like going through all these death experiences
Wow.
when they tripped. But so that's, what you have here is a type of a ritual process, right? So it's a sort of the ritual processing of humanity. But this whole thing, like, okay, just a coincidence, you picked the name The Grateful Dead, and then the whole backbone of the main guru for the whole LSD world is Tim Leary, right?
Right.
So, and of course you have different centers or different locations for this. Okay, so the next quote I think is very, very important. So let's listen to this carefully. This is Owsley again.
Okay.
So good. They were going to be bigger than the
Okay.
Beatles.
Sorry about that.
I heard that.
Yeah, here we go.
that whole trip was so freaky that I thought they were messing with something that was probably very dangerous. Was what I thought. This is not so good.
Oh wait, not so good.
Okay, so listen to that. Messing with something that was very dangerous, right? So this is Owsley admitting, and he's going to talk about some of the experimentation that was being done on the live subjects, right? And if I get to this Macy conference book, I can talk about there's a quote from one of these doctors saying that they want to use it on a mass basis, the application of LSD on a mass basis. They say a mass therapeutic basis, but basically they want to make it that almost everybody going to see their doctor is getting prescribed LSD. But okay, here we go. Owsley again.
They were going to be bigger than the Beatles. This is not so.
That was them. That was me standing in the room listening to them play their set.
Uh-huh.
I thought that, right? But then all the rest of then I went on a cosmic trip into other chambers of the universe and for the rest of that night. And then the next day or a few days later, I talked to Kesey. I says, hey, you're messing with stuff from ancient stuff, right? This is, and without any maps, this maybe need to be careful of this. It was kind of scary. They kind of laughed at me. Well, it's sort of like the guy that gets on a roller coaster for the first time. Supposing some guy was a Yanomami Indian or something, right? He comes out of the forest, the first thing he does, somebody puts him on a roller coaster, right? He's never even seen civilization, somebody puts him on a roller coaster.
Right. Right. He's going to go back and say, boy, civilization.
No, no. What it is that you get off that thing and say that's very dangerous, that's scary, right?
Oh, I see.
And yet other people go around and around again and again and again.
Wait a minute, you've been taking acid a lot.
Oh, I think
So it wasn't the acid that was the scary part, it was the Grateful Dead.
No, it wasn't the Grateful Dead.
The linkage was the scary part.
Yeah, the prankster thing. The prankster thing, right?
The mind.
Yeah, which was
so group mind, right? He's talking about, so they did a lot of this stuff in creating group consciousness or group mind. right? So they worked on all these things, and one of them was this fusion, right, of people into this sort of collective hive mind. So that's, I just wanted to just
Interesting. Yeah.
foreground that. Yep, continue here.
We're part of it. I mean, Grateful Dead were pranksters.
Right.
They were musicians. They were also pranksters. It was like, the next time I saw them was at the Fillmore Acid Test, and I met Phil, and I walked over to him and I said, I'd like to work with you guys, because I had decided that this was the most amazing thing I'd ever run into. He says, so we have.
Okay. So that's just a little bit, but just saying that, you know, that there's also this occult ritualistic aspect that he's alluding to, and he gets into it a little bit more, you know, a little bit more, you know, clearly. But so this ties in, of course, with virtual reality, and we'll get in towards the end, you know, with the 6G and everything like that, right? So this is sort of the beginning of the work along these things.
The foundation, right?
Yeah. So now this, so one thing that's, of course, we don't have time, or you know, where it's not outside the purview of this topic, but to get into how this whole process is it goes all the way back, not with, you know, psychedelics, but it goes back, you know, at least to the Renaissance, if not before. And this idea of alchemy, but then of course the, you know, lead into gold is being sort of a, you know, as a symbolic reference point, you know, to the modification, even both of the alchemist himself, but also using the alchemy on the society at large, right? To transform society and culture, to transform humanity. You know, like the great work, right? This is the great work of the occultists, right? And it's, you know, so this is now we'll go to Owsley talking about alchemy. Here we go.
I can't hear that.
Oh,
so
sorry, man.
You may have to unplug something.
Yeah. No. I have the mute on the monitor, so it doesn't feedback. Thanks.
Okay.
I'm going to do that. Just got to turn the monitor switch, and here we go.
So we have the three major religions that are connected with the materialistic culture in the Western world, and science, which was the remaining investigative urge remaining from alchemy, which was a philosophy about the world, the life, universe, God, what it is. Because of the belief that the practitioners of alchemy had, that they could understand the universe by manipulating the physical things, which then became chemistry and physics and so forth, that by understanding the rules by which the universe was put together, they could extrapolate these rules into the unseen universe and into other things.
Okay, so just to foreground that, so it's a material basis. It's operating both. So it's a mixture of occult and science, right? So we see the same thing with, like, for example, the Stanford dream telepathy experiments, etc. But okay, I'll continue.
Because alchemy teaches that as above, so below. If you understand something that works on one level, you can understand it on another. And a common example of this is the similarity, the structure of the solar system and the structure of an atom, which can be represented or thought about in a similar fashion.
We seem to be coming back to that now as this chaos theory emerges and fractals and stuff as a way of explaining.
Well, I always thought of it like alchemy itself was like a seed, because it embodied very basic concepts, usually described as the 7 principles. And that from that seed, when it was planted, grew basically grew several, but basically 2 trees, 2 plants. One plant we call chemistry, the other plant we call physics. There was also biology, et cetera, all the different disciplines. But two basic disciplines, which are physics and chemistry, which are two distinct ways of looking at the physical interactions of objects in the universe. One, the mechanical interactions, one, the chemical interactions, reactive interactions. But as these sciences developed and as they began to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into the structure of matter, all of a sudden it wasn't solid anymore. It became vibrational, became energetic, became fields. And things like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which says you can't describe everything about something appear, and all kinds of different things it starts to get very strange and turns back into just vibration. You deal with it as vibration. So you might say that the plants grew up and they flowered, the flowering being modern technology, and then they set seed, and the seed is not can flip back again.
Right.
That's just the way. That's the way I look at it.
That's cool.
The individual plants are highly specialized, but when they come back together, they produce a unified concept once again.
So it's more cyclical than linear, and we like that.
Yeah, well, everything is cyclical. And we go back to alchemy.
There we go. Good, I like that.
Yeah, sure. The whole concept of the universe as a conscious entity, which is dreaming it all up, makes it easy to understand such things as telepathy. And why is
it's more cyclical than linear, and we like that.
Yeah, well, everything is cyclical. And we go back to alchemy.
There we go. Good, I like that.
Yeah, sure. The whole concept of the universe as a conscious entity, which is dreaming.
Okay. Anyway, so that's just, for, this alchemy aspect, though, and they go into more detail, but so the alchemy, you have that, prima materia, solve alchalagia, sort of chaos theory, generating chaos, dissolving the personality, right? Even going through, like you had that stuff up from the Book of the Dead, right? And that's a dissolution. But, they're using, as he said, physics and chemistry, right? So they are both being applied, right? Like if you look at the huge sound arrays, right? The Grateful Dead sound arrays, the massive speaker arrays that were built by Owsley, right? With his background in electrical engineering, with the military background he had, and his own stuff. So we can, okay. Well, if you want to chime in there, William, if you'd like to.
Sorry, I was muted. They're interesting to how they really are thinking about everything. They're really integrating this kind of new technology with the old concepts, old esoteric concepts. And that's kind of what they're pushing forward. So it is remarkable to hear them talk in that time, because they laid the groundwork for all this stuff, for raves and everything that's going on today. All these different types of music too, right? Trance music, all that stuff. You can see it's genius. Trace it back to these guys, I think.
Yeah. And if you look at the research, I can just go off a little bit talking about the Radio Research Project. Of course, you have Gordon Allport, but just some quotes. You have like Theodore Adorno, right? Frankfurt School, but they were working on this stuff, in depth. And so, like, here's a quote, Theodore Adorno: "Not only are hit songs, stars, and soap operas cyclically recurrent and rigidly invariable types." So hit songs, stars, and soap operas, and we could say television media, cyclically recurrent and rigidly invariable types. So he's talking about also this, if you look at it like, you can look at it in a more esoteric way, but a lot of this, in sort of the occultic sense, they're working on the astral plane, right? Astral entities. They're sort of, you go out, you take LSD, you read the Book of the Dead, you're not, most likely you're not really going to a real spiritual plane. You're going into this astral plane where you have all these types of entities and even energies, and even, we call that the ether, or whatever. But, so this, you could look at the culture itself as being almost stuck in time, right? A time loop. Does that make sense to you? Like, we have all these things just keep repeating, right? All the shows, we keep back cycling to different eras now. You know what I mean? It's like everything is going back. And look how the 60s, I mean, was it, how many eras are totally forgotten about, right? But why are the 60s seen as this pivotal era, and this music and the freedom and Woodstock and peace and love and let's go but anyways, so keep going. Okay, go. Adorno says, quote, but the specific content of the entertainment itself is derived from them and only appears to change. The details are interchangeable. So we probably won't get to all the details on this, but we're looking at media itself, experiments with schizophrenia, right? Generation of schizophrenia, and how television can induce a type of a dreamlike state, right? Where your brain is shut down, and a certain way of inducing schizophrenia and even modeling schizophrenic patterns and schizophrenic types of communication in the television programming or media programming, etc., that is generating these patterns on a mass societal dimension. Obviously, if you take LSD and you're at the acid test, and you have all these like crazy sounds and all these even like types of delay, right? There's a type of sound weapon, right? It's used for crowd control, where if someone's talking, right, giving a speech, it will send back their own voice sound at a certain delay. And if you have a certain delay, it's a certain basically the number of milliseconds, you can't think anymore. It'll shut off your ability to think, just hearing your own voice being reflected back at a very specific time interval, right? And so this has been used again for shutdown protests or whatever, this and that. But I mean, this is the kind of stuff the pranksters were doing with all these types of delay effects and dichotic hearing, left right ear, and things like that, which this affects the hemispheres of your brain, right? So we're talking about not just you could say the psychological, the quote spiritual aspect, the cultural aspect, but the neurophysiological aspect, right? Affecting and imprinting your endocrinal system, affecting the entire operation and function of your brain, within which, and if I don't know if I can find the quote, the recording of Owsley talking about they're using very specific sound frequencies that burrowed a hole into your brain, right? And it was like they have a plug they can just attach stuff to. Well, once these patterns have been induced, then you can drop in different types of programming into these pre-made types of cybernetic loop systems that are functioning in an individual basis, in a societal basis, in a relationship basis, and then being promoted and generated through the media. Is that if I went too far afield with that?
No, I think it makes sense. So they're basically creating the state where they can insert things to make people in a suggestible state, right? So they can insert whatever they want, whatever reprogramming.
Well, much more than that, because basically what you're doing is you're inducing certain types of shocks to the system, right? You're inducing certain types of things that are going to cause types of dissociative states, like kind of types of trauma, right? You can look at 9/11, that's a collective trauma. You look at COVID, that's a collective trauma, right? So these create, and even, through media. I mean, we could look at that, the quote unquote kids movie, which was the, what was it? Oh crap, I forgot the name of it. It was not Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, the new Wizard of Oz movie, which was made, I think, with 80s or 90s. There's a lot of crazy stuff in that, right? And if a kid sees that movie, those images, that stuff is traumatic. I mean, and stuff is going to be embedded or programmed, right? Violence on television, right? The film Videodrome, the Cronenberg film, you know that?
Yes, I do. I do very well. Yeah.
Well, Videodrome, right? The premise of that movie is what? sex and violence, right? Modifying the brain, right? So it's not so much the content itself, but it's what that content does to the brain itself, right? And then once these and even, I can go through all the research, which is quite extensive, but what we go back to Plato's Republic, right? And Plato's talking about how certain types of music, going back to ancient Greeks, it's not like this is new, this effect, certain types of music, if even entertainment, if children are exposed to it or teenagers are exposed to it, it will totally imbalance their emotional systems. It'll imbalance their minds. It balances the glandular system, right? So the glandular system, your adrenals and pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, and all this stuff, that creates the music actually can affect that and developmentally affect that. So basically there's, you introduce like a system error, right? You introduce almost like a split consciousness, and then you can insert all these types of embedded programs, but unless you go to that base level, of the nervous system or whatever, you'll never get to it. You can talk about it day in, day out. You can do whatever. You know what I mean? It's on a level that, your conscious mind and intellect cannot access that. It's inscribed in the body. It's inscribed in behavioral patterns. And that's what's kind of going on with a lot of these types of things. And of course, it's cumulative, right? So you have all these types of stimulation. I mean, look at quick cuts, look at flashing strobe lights in certain movies and television. Even the pattern of cutting that makes your brain not only fracturing consciousness, but like the photic driving, certain you induce certain types of brain states, right? Through these just even the lights or the flashing of images, etc. And so so there's all these different levels, right, that it's operating on, and that's what he's alluding to with the alchemy, right? It's and this is also, because look, Bob Weir is a member of the Bohemian Grove, you know what I mean? Yeah, he's not, go ahead, you're welcome.
Well, I was just going to say he's a lifelong member, but are you saying that they're embedding these patterns into people all the way back in the 60s?
Oh, for sure. I mean,
for sure.
So let me just read some of this stuff of Adorno real quick from the mid, early 40s. Researchers of the Radio Project concluded that radio had already so conditioned the minds of its listeners, having rendered them fragmented and unthinking, that repetition of format was the key to popularity. So they're already talking. Gordon Allport wrote The Psychology of Radio in 1933. Okay. So they looked at, say, like FDR was a very important case study, because basically with the radio, is that, you have the a lot of this, the enemy number one is the family structure, right? For the Grateful Dead, I think we played some of that earlier stuff talking about people, this is the new family. Your families aren't working. Your society doesn't work. Leave your family, come to our family, right? But the radio, it subverts the authority of the sort of the patriarchal father figure to this box, right? This giant box sitting in the living room. And so this was studied, like how this affects people's consciousness, how music affects consciousness, right? And then, I mentioned in the 40s, the experimentation with, light, sound, and other things was being done. And we had that, I think last week we came up with that amazing thing of directly linking Tavistock, the son of the founder of the Tavistock Institute to, one of the, sort of behind the scenes, important figures within this whole psychedelic movement. This is from Macy Conference book. I'll go ahead and I'll share the screen. Hopefully this will work. And so you can see this is talking about 1949, introducing this stuff here. All right, man. I lost my sense of humor, man. I don't joke anymore. I'm extremely serious, man.
Where's the is the Macy? Is it a website or are you going to bring up a document?
No. This is a book.
Well,
So this is so wait, window. So I just do entire screen.
yeah, you can just go present.
Yeah, and I'm just going to share, and then I'm going to bring up my.
Oh, that's not it.
Oh, that's the infinite. Okay, how's that? Is that going?
Let's try that. That looks better.
Okay, do you see in that picture the slides?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, so this is from the use of LSD in for psychotherapy. I think it was 1964. Macy conference book. And I mean, is your audience familiar with the Macy conferences, or you want to say?
I think so. I think if they went back and listened to the earlier shows, we talk about the Macy conferences. They were like, I don't know, like salons or intellectual salons of forward futurist thinkers, right?
Yeah. Okay. So and what's really, really interesting about the Macy conferences, I mean, they, the whole cybernetic, the whole cyberspace, right? Which is also connected with the counterculture, and you have Esalen Institute and all that stuff. This is all, related to Bateson, even going back to Margaret Mead, who was a central member of the Macy conferences. Their first conference was cerebral inhibition, which good luck trying to find that book, right? Or that the conference meeting records. But cerebral inhibition is hypnosis, but cerebral inhibition is what we are really looking at, right? Cerebral inhibition, in fact, inducing a hypnotic trance state for populations in its entire populations, and that people think of hypnosis, right? You'll I don't know, whatever, you'll lie in a bed of nails, or you'll people have seen all the hypnosis acts, where people do these make members of the audience do these crazy things. But there's a cerebral inhibition, is we go back to John Luria, right? Go back to Luria with that "I'm a little puppet" thing. We talk, and many other of these, these records that were tied in with the communist, tied in with Pavlovian research on generating schizophrenia using metronomic beats, asynchronous metronomic beats, using you're simulating the parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system at the same time. You're having your arousal, which means your towards and your away response fired up at the same time. This creates like a shutdown of almost the brain and the nervous system, which can be taken by the participant as a state of ecstasy, or a state of like, wow, this feels great, I'm so relaxed, because you just overloaded your whole nervous system. But any trauma or any patterns that occur within that get pushed very, very deeply below the threshold of consciousness. But anyway, so this is Denver. Unfortunately, I don't have his first name, but so in this meeting devoted to LSD, I probably shouldn't mention the drug in which I am primarily interested, which is mescaline. So in 1952, Dr. Sidney Merlis, director of psychiatric research at Central Islip State Hospital, and I, who were both very much interested in electroencephalography, decided to study the effects of mescaline on the human EEG. So that's basically where you're monitoring brainwave signals, right, and seeing what it's doing to the brain. After about 2 years, we had exhausted the possibility of surface EEG studies, and depth EEG work was out of our range. Therefore, we shifted to the clinical aspect. At the time, I was affiliated with the Analytical Institute. Let's skim through Merlis, and I found that the combination of mescaline and chlorapomazine had therapeutic action, a finding still disputed. So we'll just skip through here, chemistry of the drug. And one thing just about the Macy conference stuff, it's a lot of what some of their books and their meeting minutes, right? They're very hard to understand, or there's a lot of encoded language. So even, the books you'll buy, you have to sort of read between the lines, right? So there's a video out there of the Macy conference. They're very much connected with occult things too, even though, cybernetics, Norbert Wiener connected with guided missile control systems, but command and control structures of human beings, right? That's fundamentally what the cybernetics was linked to, which is linked to obviously our current cybernetic technotronic control matrix that we live in. But I'll just go down here a little further. So this is Savage. So in 1949, under Navy auspices, I was looking for improved methods of inducing psychocatharsis and facilitating psychotherapy, as I had found that sodium amytal and pentothal disappointing. Now, psychocatharsis and psychotherapy, what does it mean by those words, right? So sodium amytal, these are like truth terms, are they not?
Right. Yes.
So does that sound like a type of therapy? Not necessarily. Right? Okay. I ran through the gamut of alkaloids from mescaline and cannabis through harmaline, scopolamine, and cocaine. Scopolamine, right? Isn't that not that the drug that you blow up on somebody?
The devil's bell or whatever they call it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll forget everything.
Yeah. So again, mentioning you kind of have to read between the lines slightly in these Macy conference text, is that he's talking about studying psychocatharsis and facilitating psychotherapy. Does it sound like any of these drugs, are going to help with the, what those two words would mean on the surface? I don't think so. Right.
No way.
So we're talking about breakdown and control. I've never even heard of hamamine and Halmarline. I'm not sure what those are, but we look them up. So we'll keep going. So I was primarily interested in mescaline, but was dismayed by the intense nausea it produced both in me and my other patients. When I learned from Dr. Berenger that LSD produced Einsuserrasch. Do you know German?
Not that word.
Okay.
Maybe so.
I probably looked that up, but it probably means like a better trip than mescaline. I don't know. I began to use it. I have been working with it on and off ever since. Concurrently, I was attempting to integrate psychopharmacological and psychoanalytic data, and particularly to understand the meaning of the LSD experience, the similarity of the processes in the LSD state, and schizophrenia impressed me more and more. Okay, so in the same conference, they're talking about mass administration of LSD for therapy, right? I may or may not get to those pages. Do you see what he's saying right there, right? Schizophrenia, the schizophrenic state. But he's saying, now he's saying a treatment for antagonists, LSD antagonists, which might be useful in the treatment of schizophrenia. So that is things that block LSD being used to treat schizophrenia. That doesn't sound yet, but they're pushing. This is all. This whole conference is LSD and therapeutic clinical uses. What's interesting is that there's books, which I've never been able to locate, of the Macy conferences done in the late 50s, early 60s. Before all these conferences on the therapeutic benefits or use in psychoanalysis, talking about psychedelics, drugs, and inducing states of insanity. How to use psychedelic drugs to induce insanity. How insanity is induced. It's primarily schizophrenia, right? So, anyways, so these people are all connected, of course, with what Kesey and Babs and Robert Hunter, who also was at Stanford. In fact, the whole Warlocks was at Stanford. And I believe also that the guy from who set up the Red Dog Saloon was also at Palo Alto. So
is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Or at least there. So just continue here with this. So I talked about schizophrenia. Dr. Evans and I worked with monkeys for a while in order to find out how LSD affected their visual learning behavior. In small doses, it did not affect them. In large doses, it tranquilized them. I might say it stupefied them. Then I went back to work with humans. Though Dr. Everts continued to work with monkeys and discovered, as you know, a specific blocking effect of LSD on the lateral geniculate body. Okay, so that's a part of the brain, and I'll just let me jump to here, and I'll try to zoom this in. So what I was talking about, this sort of induction. I won't be able to get into to all the stuff on television probably, but there's a lot of research on that. Unfortunately, what's weird is a bunch of stuff was done on television. Nothing was done on our current mass media, right? I mean, with the cyber age or whatever. But anyways, so we're talking about this. So this is the vagus nerve, cognitive functions. This symptom, you'd like to read that, William, because I've been talking a lot. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Continue.
So cognitive functions, this symptom of low vagal tone is one that people find the most surprising. But as the vagal nerve enters the brain, it merges with a part of the brainstem, which is in turn linked to many cognitive networks in the brain. The exact flow of information through these networks is not fully understood by scientists, but by following activation levels in these networks, it is possible for science to gain some idea of the brain's interconnected pathways. By testing human performance in specific tasks, science can build up a picture of how vagal nerve activity affects brain functions. Low vagal tone in such ways has been linked to memory, learning, and concentration. It is not cognitive decline, difficulty concentrating, poor memory, difficulties. So the vagus nerve, main takeaway from this post is because the vagus nerve is such an important nerve with wide-ranging function in the body, the symptoms associated with low vagal tone can be broad and sometimes unclear. But basically, we're talking about, affecting, the vagus nerve, but also the reticular activating system. And I think these scans are kind of a pain. K-Langers.
But the vagus nerve is like what takes all the information from your brain to your body, right? Isn't that where it is? It's like basically at your brainstem.
Yeah. Medulla oblongata, right? So that's connected. And so what's really important to and I'm gonna actually look up the lateral geniculate body. I should have done that. Or do you want to look that up? Can you see that at the bottom? Lateral
geniculate body.
Or the geniculate body. It's the last line on that page.
Geniculate body. There it is. Structure of the thalamus and a key component of the mammalian visual pathway.
Yeah. So thalamus, hypothalamus, what is that connected with? This is connected with the reticular activating system, which is the master control for what your body allows, what your mind perceives as important or even perceives as reality. So the reticular activating system connects, with, basically it's the whole brain, but it's how your perceptions are basically edited by the brain itself. It's what, if your reticular activating system will not allow you to perceive certain things, they'll be blocked out of your awareness, right? Even though you're experiencing them, you will not notice them, or they will, they'll be unimportant. So it's a reality filtering mechanism. And if you can mess with this on the neurological level, and people don't know that this is being done, you have a way to where people will, not only flow information, but perception of reality, perception of their own bodies. Look at, I'm not trying to get attacked here by activists, but look at the whole, what do you think of today I'm an it. I'm not a he.
Oh, right. He, she, Jiju, all that stuff. Yeah.
But what is that? So your body, right? This is where you are not able, your reticular activating system has been conditioned to see that your body, what you biologically are, as wrong or something that can be manipulated and changed. And once this is in your reticular activating system and it's how you perceive the world, it can take a lot to get out of that. Right.
Right.
And so this also ties into, I think COVID is a great example of that, right? I mean, and look at all the different conditioning protocols that were invoked, right? You've done some
Right.
stuff like that, right? I mean, look at
Yeah,
that.
I've done tons of that. Yeah. Behavioral science, all that stuff, manipulation.
But when you can encode something to the reticular activating system, it will continually frame what you can even see as reality, right? It will shape it.
Right.
It will block certain perceptions. That's why people just can't see certain things, right? So and just to say, like, the idea that this was for therapeutic use, well, the therapy they're talking about, psychocatharsis, scopolamine inducing schizophrenia, you know and then we go into television and music and light and sound, how this can be done even without the drug, right? So you're mimicking the effects. You're starting to be able to insert these things, and you're beginning to be able to, you manipulate reality by manipulating what people see as reality, right?
Right.
So, um,
it's very powerful. Yeah. No, incredible.
so
Like people, yeah, it's like giving them blank spots almost.
yeah. And, just to stress this is that when this stuff is encoded, you know, yes, there'll be, say, like a state, people will have, I mean, these things that are suppressed, right? Because certain part of your body is going to be telling you, hey, you're missing something, right? There's more neurons in your gut than there are in your brain, right? I mean, but a lot of times this will become what? It'll become mental health problems, will become depression, which is, depression and chronic stress or anxiety. These are both blocking mechanisms for emotion, right? So what it's doing is your body is shutting down. Addiction is a great addictive behaviors, because you want to block out this discomfort, right? You have this existential sense something is wrong, but it's in a precognitive state. You can't, you know what I mean? And you don't even want to go into that.
Right.
And especially when this is blocked from your perception by embedded traumatic codes that are coming through the media, coming through, you can look at, you ever done anything on like SRA, anything like that?
Oh yeah, a lot. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
I've replayed some stuff on satanic ritual abuse.
So have you heard that interview with the president of the American Society of Hypnotists, where he talks about he just totally faded out after doing this thing, but he's talking about working with all of these patients who had similar you ever heard this? It's really fascinating. I think it was done in the 80s. But this guy's, one of the most respected clinical hypnotist in the world, and he's talking about running into these symptoms with particular code and command lines all over the world, right? Not just in one place, right? Different types of programming, different types of the 64 by 64 cube, where the personality is fractured into this cube, and you have all these different personalities. You even have the self-destruct personality, right? You have the and this is what we get into when we talk about Abraham Maslow, right? You familiar with everyone's?
Yeah, the pyramid of needs or whatever he came up with. Wasn't it everybody had the same pyramid of wants or something like that?
Well, Maslow was also very much connected with this, because what for Maslow, so everyone uses the word, self-actualize. I want to self-actualize, right? What's the pinnacle of human achievement? Orgasm, sex, right? For Maslow. Right. So Abraham Maslow, the peak of human experience is sex. But he also was very instrumental in formulating this induction by also, so we could say psychotronic, photogenic. We have, how about, we haven't even talked about lyrics, but we also have this splitting of the self, which is what Adorno, I have some stuff from Adorno in front of me. Theodore Adorno, right, talks about, which is it's called the inner mirror, right? So the inner mirror is, Lacan was sort of a post-Freudian, but he went a lot deeper. But the inner mirror is basically a stage, when you're growing up, where basically you have this identity that's actually you're mirroring, say, your father or mother, right? Your parent. And it's going to be, from, 3 months old to, 1 year old to 2 years old. But there's this mirror where you see yourself as the other, right? Inside of your own mind. Does that make sense? So
Yes,
you're,
yes.
but if that stage is not properly gone through, this inner mirror remains inside of you. And so, as Adorno talks about, is that every time you listen to a song, you in your inner mirror, you see yourself as the protagonist of that song, right? And then Maslow talks about self-esteem. This is hyphen esteem. People think, oh, I have high self-esteem or low self-esteem. What's self-esteem? Self-esteem is what it literally means is that how you value yourself based on how you imagine other people see you. So you're mirroring what you think other people see you, and you're taking that reflection, and this is how you're defining yourself. So, and this is what's promoted, self-esteem, right? Self-esteem, you're already fractured. You're already, you know what I mean? So this is what was induced, even, that quote I read, is this was being induced through the radio, right? And then, and we have all these other aspects. So go ahead.
Well, no, it's just interesting. Like there's these, they're very sophisticated. A lot of these guys were in all this behavioral modification, right? Going all the way back. Psychologists were involved in it all.
Yeah. So we just mentioned that this is Hirsch. According to Hirsch, so he was at there's a report by Paul Hirsch for the not Mexican. It probably should be Mexican now. I'm just kidding. Michigan Institute for Social Research. I'm just kidding. Total joke. So Michigan Institute for Social Research. And Paul Hirsch is talking about Adorno's radio research project. Transformed the nation's post-war hit parade, transformed the mass media into an agency of subcultural programming. Wow. Radio networks were converted into round-the-clock recycling machines that repeated the top 40 hits. So this is a subcultural programming, right? This is talking about media itself as being part of this cultural programming, and that basically people are fragmented and they're not able to access what they're actually feeling, right? They've lost touch. And I've had people, contact me in the past, whatever, you made me hate music or this and that. I mean, it's like I saw a great show last night. I saw Shakti with John McLaughlin. I mean, that was just amazing music, very, very, just on a much higher level, your whole body, whole nervous system, where you can say spiritual level, very, very healing, very nourishing. But other types of music, people can't recognize that they're getting negative physical reactions to it, right? All these studies, with the plants, right, where you play plants. There's also the water studies, where you say like F you or, I hate you or something like that to water, how it changes, how the water, the ripple or wave patterns. But just with plants, right, how plants would die. You play plants, psychedelic rock, heavy metal, the plants die. Wow. If you play classical music, the plants flourish.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And, so anyways, I'll just continue this real quick. So Operation Mockingbird. So the direction of the radio research project was Paul Lazarsfeld with a PhD in industrial psychology. Married Herta Hezrock, the first director of CIA's Voice of America, eventual chairman of the RAND Corporation, and also head of CBS Broadcasting.
Wow.
The founder and chief executive officer of CBS was career intelligence operative William Paley, also a member of the CFR. At the behest of his friend Ewan Dulles, Paley hired CIA agents to work, undercover. And so this is talking about, Project Mockingbird. Everyone's heard of this, of course, but there's a quote, Frank Wisner: propaganda, economic warfare, preventative direct action, including sabotage, anti-sabotage, demolition and evacuation measures, subversion against hostile states, including assistance to underground resistance groups, blah, blah, blah. But, okay. So yeah, we talked already about, occult mystery rites, which we'll go back to the dead real quick here. So there, we played before or whatever. I mean, they're talking about using occult mystery rites, right? They're using framework of the occult mystery rites within the music. And who is, of course, one of the main people. And this is something I, of course, mentioned like with Jan. So Jan certainly did a lot with Huxley. But I mean, Huxley was really, really, really central, right? Brave New World. People say it's like a warning. No, this is like a template. Right.
It's a blueprint. Yeah, it's a blueprint for his ideal society, right?
Right. And so we have, The Devils of London. Have anyone seen that movie by Ken Russell? It's
Devils of Loudon. Yeah,
Loudon. It's almost like an X-rated movie, right? Have you seen that? I mean, it's crazy. But that was a book by it's
a true story. It's based on nonfiction. Yeah. Urban Grandier was the guy's name. Grandier.
Yeah, so this Alex Huxley in the Devils of London book from 1952.
It's Loudon though. It's in France. Loudon.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Did I say London?
You said London. Yeah, but it's close enough.
Oh my God.
It's Loudon somewhere in France. I think it's in central France is where it happened, right? Where all the nuns went crazy and and the whole city just went into insanity, and then they eventually burned him at the stake, right?
Yeah. Well, let me just quote from Huxley. Okay. If exposed long enough to the tom-toms and the singing, every one of our philosophers would end by capering and howling with savages.
Wow.
Assemble a mob of men and women, treat them to amplified band music, bright lights, and in next to no time, you can reduce them to a state of almost mindless subhumanity. Never before have so few be in a position to make fools, maniacs, or criminals of so many.
Wow,
okay.
That's incredible.
Yeah, yep. And then we go into this. So let me I'll continue. Just Adorno quote, in an imaginary, and so this is very, very important, right? In an imaginary but psychologically emotion-laden domain, the person who remembers a hit song will turn into the song's ideal subject. Okay. And so you can even look, I think I did something on the Wake the Dead show. I think we just did like one or two Grateful Dead songs, with these, the lyricists, with all these embedded command lines. You find the same thing in a lot of these songs where they're not only telling what they're doing, you're identifying with the subject of the song that's being addressed, and they're telling you what they're doing to your mind, how they're going to make you destroy yourself, how they're going to make you do this or that, right? And we went into the most, the whole punk rock, that very sort of unpleasant little detour, right, into Mr. Punk Rock, right? So that's right. This is the same process, right? God, his name just slipped my mind.
Who? Sean McCann? Sean McCann?
No. The Jesus guy, the punk rock guy. We did, he was on the TV show. He'd roll around in his own.
G.G. Allen.
G.G. Allen. I don't. I haven't. G.G. Allen. So, but that is that not?
He was like in his own. He was extreme punk or extreme something. He wasn't in even the vein of like the Sex Pistols or something.
But see, this is the continuation of this same process, right? And part of it is that you don't know, you've lost certain types of signaling, right? We could say subconscious, but actually from your body, your quote intuition, from your own nervous system, right? So there's a mental structure that's basically trying to hold the dam together, right? So you can function, or you don't have to face these traumatic things, but you're constantly being re-traumatized. And and there's, of course, it's not just one layer, right? I said there's many, many layers. So again, going back to Adorno, the listener who remembers a hit song will turn into that song's ideal subject, into the person that song ideally speaks. Right. At the same time as one of the many who identify with that fictitious subject, that musical eye he will feel his isolation as he feels himself integrated into the community of fans. Okay. So that's an important thing to break down.
Right.
Okay.
So they're atomized and integrated at the same time. So they listen to the song by themselves, but they're in the same process with everybody else who's listening to that song, and they identify with the protagonist, whoever it is, whoever's Hey Jude or whatever. I don't know. Right.
Yeah. So, and also though, that, so in a sense, the community, right? So we're also looking at, so, I may not find that quote. It's in here somewhere, I believe, but you're talking about, all the experimentation, the merry pranksters, literally building a group mind, you know what I mean? Like working, rigorously to develop this group collective psyche, which, it can have LSD experience. You could step into a collective mind. This is the type of, application now at an extreme level. But when you go into that group mind, you're actually isolated from yourself, right? You are
interesting. Yeah.
Just like, what about social media? People that, kill themselves, because they get too many dislikes on Facebook, or people that fall off a cliff taking a selfie, right? I mean, what's that? Or I did, years ago, I talked about Pokemon Go, right, as a rollout for actually COVID. Because I was, at that time, I was flying around the country and I didn't know what was going on. I was like 4 different states. It was just crazy. I walked into, I think it was Texas somewhere, but it was, there was it was like this kind of a public, square with like a fountain, and all these people were walking around looking at their phones, and they're just like, there was no relationship between them. It was like a mass controlled zombies. And I kept seeing this. I'm like, what is happening? And people walking in front of cars playing Pokemon Go.
Right. Yeah. Crazy stuff. Like a general madness of crowds type thing. But it's also interesting. Like, you can also surmise that the Grateful Dead created this kind of global consciousness with the Deadheads, right? So they all know the lyrics. They've listened to the songs a million times. Like, they're almost in a kind of trance zombified state just from listening to their music all the time. Like, I know Deadheads that just listen to the Dead. They don't even listen to other music. They just listen to old bootleg tapes and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's really incredible.
Well, and here's the thing, again, the Dead, I mean, they're not, their lyrics are very deep, right? They are, they are like almost, there's so many layers. And if you analyze them like psycholinguistic theory and other types of things like that, whatever, you see that there's a lot of stuff going on in those lyrics that is affecting your brain, right? How language affects reality, right? And then we tie that into your reticular activating system, your vagal nerve. You have certain, certain types of, you stimulate certain parts of the brain are suppressed, allowing information triggers, allowing, whether linguistic, psychological, sociological, psychotronic, whatever, to go in there, and then you go back to normal. It's like it just covers up, right? It's like you got this hidden wound, right? But it's covered up. Okay, anyways, continue with Adorno. In whistling such a song, he bows to a ritual of socialization. Although beyond this unarticulated, subjective stirring of the moment, his isolation continues unchanged. The comparison with addiction is inescapable, right?
Right. Wow.
So what you're doing is, as you harm yourself more, you're more and more attracted to it to fix the problem. And the more and more you're in your big, rock concert, or, you're on social media, or whatever kind of pseudo collective identity you have, or this identity, you're more and more and more isolated, even though on the surface it seems like, oh my God, I have all these new friends, right? I'm part of something. But it's reinforcing this isolation. And the problem is that you go back to that inner mirror level. Once that, you're never able you're blocked from being yourself because you're just this reflection that's like it's, you know what I mean? It's like, you go back to Hegel, phenomenology of mind, how anything consciousness access, it splits into both a subject and a perceiver, right? But you become both the subject and object of your own perception. It's like you're watching yourself on this mirror, which is like a television screen, but then you're also having all these external projections on there, but that mirror is not you. And you think even the deepest identity you can access is the part of you that's watching the mirror, right? But then that it's just like a mirror. That mirror can keep fragmenting and going on and on and on. It's almost like infinite types of fracturing, right? And in a much more, obviously you look at the SRA programming. This is a much more, deeper level of doing that, but it's almost the same type of a process of these types of compartmentalizations, right? Of these types of multiple identities or multiple unconscious behavior patterns, because if you're not able to feel what you're actually feeling, if what you think is helping you, I go to the show, I feel like I'm with my friends, I take drugs, I feel so much better, I come back, but I have to go back to my crappy life, but when I do this, this is healing and joyful. No. And and it's what's happening is that all the energy of your real life is getting more and more extracted into this artificial virtual reality. And then okay, well, go ahead, Sean.
No, it's really interesting because that's the process taking place with all these concert goers or fans or all that stuff. That's the process, is like it's being absorbed into something artificial. These are like the Swifties or whatever. And I think that's just like the process part of it. Like they're getting the full on music, visual imagery as well, right? They're all being indoctrinated, or there's stuff being presented before them that, they're in a passive, suggestive environment, So, I mean, I think that the Grateful Dead are one example of people who were intentionally kind of subversive or even sinister toward their own fans. Like they're clearly using techniques, advanced kind of psychological techniques to influence their own people who like them. I think they probably should have stayed the Warlocks. They should have stayed named the Warlocks, as far as I'm concerned. But Hans, we are almost at the 90-minute mark. I got to wrap it up.
Okay,
we'll have to do another show. I'll have to do another 8. I know that we've barely.
Oh my God! Yeah. Well, can I just play this?
Yeah.
Wrap
it up.
I'll just play a couple more Owsley talking here. But like there's this this is from the church committees. This is Sidney Gottlieb. Did any of these projects involve something called radio hypnotic intercerebral control, which is a combination, as I understand it, in layman terms, of radio transmission and hypnosis, which is right. Stanford Research Institute. You got Jolly West, Sidney Gottlieb. My answer is no. You could hypnotize someone with a radio beam. So again, we're looking at all these aspects. Again, we'll just finish up with Owsley talking.
It is interesting you mentioned church, because that's where he went to law school. So maybe he knew a little bit more about that background information before the church commission or committee even got started. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, well, see, if they touch upon, but you can go back to Renaissance. Whatever, they had these like sort of early operas, but they were like literally like alchemical workings. They transform a whole palace, the outside of the grounds, people wearing different colors, all these weird things going on, weird types of music. These were like these examples of, you're doing the ritual as a way to change reality, but you're also changing the consciousness of those who participate in it, such as Aleister Crowley, foregrounded entertainment as a vehicle. So we'll just finish up with Owsley here. Here we go.
Please do.
Makes it easy to understand such things as telepathy. And why astrology? Well, astrology is a description of how the cyclical things that you can see in the recurring angles and relationships of the planets can be used to connect or to relate to the nature of events on the earth. And after hundreds of thousands of years of watching it, people evolve and say, oh yeah, well, when this happens, well, things are likely to do this. And over a long period of time, a lot of observation, we have come up with this thing. But you can't scientifically measure it. There's no direct connection. The only connection is that everything's being thought up in the mind of the being that's thinking everything up at the same time, according to the rules being what we describe as the laws of nature. Another thing. And we know some of them, we don't know all of them.
Were you thinking
Most of
about
them are
this
simple.
stuff when you started taking Manson? Were you already thinking about this stuff when?
It's hard for me to say, because I'm not a meticulously scientific kind of a guy who kept journals or anything else about the way in which I thought about stuff. And so as my viewpoint and my philosophy evolves, it replaces the philosophy that was there. And in some cases, I can remember what I thought before. But mostly I found out that I can hold an idea, a concept, and then I'll suddenly discover that it's wrong, that it's fallacious, or that I'm mistaken, associated with DNA.
Yeah,
Which
I
is
think so.
millions.
So they're talking about manipulating DNA through sound, all this other stuff. So this is just, again, Owsley, real quick.
Associated with DNA,
Yeah,
which
I
is
think so.
billions of atoms sometimes, an enormous number of atoms, all of which arranged in a very precise way would order the motion of electrons in a very, very precise and specific and special
Which
way.
would have frequency and resonances and stuff that we.
I don't know, because you see, I'm not a scientist.
No, but if you take it as above, so below, then we can assume that there would be ripples and harmonics of that all the way up into perceivable realms.
Probably, yeah.
Did you
Well,
like the
certainly,
music?
some kinds of telepathy actually involved.
Last quote, and I'll wrap up.
That scared me.
How so?
Oh, it just seemed frightening. They seem to have, all of that seemed to have a connection to a very scary and possibly dangerous aspect of reality. To me, it was some type of a plug or something in your head, and we get into some things.
So this is why I wanted to play here. This is, I think it's pretty interesting. So I'll just close with this. So
Okay,
check this out. Yep.
I remember pushing the chair. I remember all kinds of different things. Everything was making noise. It was a very noisy place.
Sorry, let me go back earlier.
To me.
Somebody told me that you pushed a chair around that building.
Yeah, I was
It
pushing
made
the
a
chair.
lot of noise.
Made some noise. Everything was making noise. It was a very noisy place. Well, it seemed like it, yeah.
Tell me more.
I
I'd
don't
like to
know.
hear your side of that story.
I don't know. I remember pushing the chair around, and I remember all kinds of different things. I remember all kinds of noises and sounds and things. The pranksters would make these noises, and the noises would seem to get inside your nervous system, and as if there was some type of a plug or something in your head, and would get in there and scrape away some kind of a cap that would make the connection available to be plugged into something, a psychic cable.
For the insulation.
Yeah, you might say, right?
Alligator clip.
Like a hymen, perhaps. Meant for the hymen. And then the connection would be made, and all the people would be linked up and start sharing thoughts and images and ideas. And it was like not just thoughts, but little thoughts and concepts, but you saw like a patchwork of images, and you felt a patchwork of body sensations and everything else. It was very definitely a gestalt, multiple mind kind of phenomenon.
Polymorphous synesthesia.
Could be, yeah, that might be a good term. That would certainly describe it.
Do you think, well, obviously other people felt this too.
But that was the first time anything like that had actually happened to me. It was very weird and scary.
Was that what those guys were working on, do you think? I mean, do you think
Nobody would talk about it.
they just did it?
Did it. You didn't talk about it. You just did it. Whatever you had done, whatever was going on in that scene for a year or two before I ran into it, they'd slowly but surely built this up. And whether it was instinctive or what, it may be very well be instinctive. Maybe that the psychedelics, all of the psychedelic plants seem to have a very ancient and direct relationship with man. as I was attempting to get into that.
So that's, you see, he's saying right there. Did you catch that? I mean, they're using sounds that would go into your nervous system, creating a plug to fuse into this sort of mass consciousness. So there it is from the mouth of the horse's mouth, the mouth of the beast, whatever.
Right. It's incredible. Yeah. Incredible stuff. Incredible admissions. You probably never thought somebody would go back through that 50 years later and kind of analyze it within the context of these phenomenon, of the Grateful Dead phenomenon, the musical pervasiveness of musical culture everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's it's been fun, William. And then
we'll do another one. Where can people find you? It's your website, right?
Yeah. You know what? We could do something. I could just, but you gotta wrap it up, or I could just finish.
Yeah, I gotta wrap it up.
Okay, we'll go then. So we got a little bit more for next time, and
more for next time. And it's Hans Utter, HANSUTTER.com. So if people want to reach out and follow up,
I'm gonna have a whole new website up. My web designers are working on it, so it's going to be all revamped. This is the one I made like a long time ago that kind of sucks, but hey, there it is. So thanks, William.
At least you have one. All right, Hans. Thanks so much for your time.
Take care, man.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye. Stay there.